All right. All yours.
Fantastic. Excited to be here. Thanks for all for the opportunity. Um, Really good presentation, by the way, by Marcelo. One observation, just to sort of build a bridge here, is that when vibe coding, I noticed a lot of the pointers that you mentioned generally apply to software engineering, right? Things like building it in small, manageable steps. I sort of had to learn that the hard way back in the day. Instead of coding the entire thing, right? Try to do it in little chunks. Don't repeat yourself. Use version control. These are all just engineering best practices, which are fantastic, but good for vibe coders to know 100%. So let's go ahead and jump in. I do want to cover AI when it comes to some of the basic things that it can do, but also really emphasize the fact that our own vigilance, excuse me, and human in the loop approach is still very much necessary, especially these days. So let's go ahead and jump in. Quick time check, Haral. The last session Marcellus went over a little bit. I'm just curious if we still want to end on the nose and if I should rush a little bit or how you want to handle that.
You can take your normal time. There's no one after you.
Okay, great. Alrighty, well, let's jump in first. Who am I? Who's this guy anyway? Up here talking to everyone. I was a software engineer for over a decade, right? 13 years. Spent time as an app architect, designing applications. Worked for these fine companies over the years. And then I got into cybersecurity as a leader. So I was head of application security over at Staples. And then I was also brought into Fivetran to roll out their AppSec program, where I worked my way up to a deputy CISO position. Today, I do a lot of various things. As you can see here, I'm an AppSec advocate for Security Journey. I co-founded a company, Catalyst, that focuses on security champion programs. I'm a consultant or a faculty member for IANS. I co-created a community, the League of Cyber Defense Champions, that's actually in beta right now. We're going to launch next year, so excited for that. I authored the Security Champion Program Success Guide, and I also do vCISO as well as vAppSec work uh, on top of that. So I'm out there. I do a lot of various things. So let's jump in and talk about AI. Obviously, AI is everywhere now. It's in software engineering. I use it daily for summarizing articles, podcasts, generating content, doing research, learning, right, and so forth. Show of hands, who's used it today already? Just a little check here. Shout out for Ian's research too. That's fantastic. Feel free to type your answer if you are working pretty consistently in AI, and I can't see hands raised. Or all, maybe you could help me out there. But I do enjoy interactive sessions, so feel free to jump in with questions as we go along. All right. So let's talk about sort of the story of computer languages, right? First generation through fifth generation languages have been tried and proposed and developed successfully. I sort of look at this as the OSI model for programming languages. If you're not familiar with that, it's essentially a networking model that basically uses abstraction, right, to hide the layers of complexity. And it's the same with programming languages, right? You have first generation languages focused on machine language, right? Ones and zeros. You have assembly language built on top of that as the second generation language. Then you have 3GLs, right? These are more of the high level languages. I'm going to go into those in a minute. And then we've seen actually 4GLs and 5GLs in the past as well. So we'll cover those as well. So, what is a third generation programming language? These are those high level, basically machine independent languages that you see today, right? C++, Python, JavaScript. The syntax is closer to human language. Obviously, it doesn't read like human language because you have to be a lot more specific with what you want the application that you're developing to do. But those are basically third generation languages. We did see and have seen fourth generation programming languages emerge over the years. These would be things like SQL, where you're selecting data from a specific table. And what's interesting about these is they are outcome based essentially you specify what you want, not necessarily how it's done in the background. That's what makes it a 4GL. MATLAB is also a good example of a 4GL. You just basically tell it what you want, right? Ring any bells, AI, anyone? We'll get to that in a minute. Fifth generation programming languages did come out in the 1980s. The whole idea behind this was you would basically define a goal, an end goal that you want to accomplish, build in some constraints, and then essentially the language would come up with a solution or an algorithm. Okay, so examples of this would be Prolog, Mercury, Lisp. As you can see on the right here, there's actually an example of Prolog where you're basically setting rules, all right? And this is essentially a family tree that you're trying to create. So the idea is you build these rules and then you basically ask it a question, as you could see down here, right? So after you set up the rules, you ask it, right? Is Tom an ancestor of Mary? It's able to answer that. Now, fifth generation languages did prove difficult to be fully realized. I think the dream there sort of fell apart, and therefore the initial hype faded. Enter AI. So, where does modern AI fit when it comes to these definitions of generations of languages? And basically, the way that AI works, as we just went over, Marcella did such a great job there, is we express intent, right? We express specs. I had this word in the presentation as well, specifications, right? Some of the details so that the AI can essentially fill in more of those details for us to review, right? That includes logic, algorithms, and so forth. So it's sort of a 4.5 GL, is the way that I like to think about it. And the reason for that is because AI moves us toward solving problems with less low-level instructions, okay? But the point is, we're still needed. And I'm going to go into that as we go. Let me pause there really quick. Any questions so far before I get more into the depth here? I don't see
We're
anything,
clear.
so I'm going to keep going. All right, so essentially, as we abstract, right, up those different generations of language, we don't necessarily have to be as concerned with the details, right? We don't have to know, essentially, when you're using a 3GL, how something like assembly works, right? Or how it even translates it into machine code. You can still be productive as a straight software engineer working on 3GL languages without knowing all of those details, is the point. Now, if you're super curious, highly recommend figuring out how things do work under the covers. But the point is, again, you can be productive without knowing all of that. Okay. So, and I see the future with AI allowing us to do more while worrying less about those details. So the point here is you should be using AI. Okay. Highly recommend it. I think that, there's some hesitation by folks like me. When I first learned about this, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're not going to have developers or even product folks understand all the details about what's happening under the covers. Won't that lead to a lot of issues? And I think the analogy here is you don't need to know how to use a typewriter to effectively use a computer. Or another example that I like to bring up here is I've got a son who loves video games. I loved video games when I was younger as well. I would love for my son to understand the history of games, right? Including Mario and all the magic that came with Atari and all of that stuff, so that he can fully appreciate what he's doing with Minecraft and some of these more modern games. But here's the point. He doesn't necessarily need to know that to really use Minecraft effectively or even to appreciate Minecraft, right? So I think the point is, our experience is different. Like the people who have been around a while might get concerned, well, what happened? Like they're not going to go through the same journey as I did in terms of learning all of this stuff. But I think that's okay. It's fine to stand on the shoulders of others. Okay. So again, vibe coding as we move along in the future here is okay. Creative builders, creative people, product people who are trying to create something new don't need to know all the details to be productive. Okay. And I think we should all embrace that. I read an interesting book I want to share with everyone here. It got pretty popular, but I don't know that it's broadly read in our space. It's called A Whole New Mind. It's by Daniel Pink, who's written a couple other fantastic books. So the idea is with more and more of the technical details covered, it's actually the right brainers, the creative types who will be the differentiators, right? It's what you can do with the technology in terms of creating something that's different in the market, creative, new, and so forth. That's what's going to make the difference. Okay, so we all need to embrace that. And I know there's a lot of technologists probably on the call. I'm a technologist as well. I love knowing how things work. But I don't think that's going to differentiate companies. I don't think that's going to differentiate you as an individual going forward. Okay. So embrace that right brain creative thinking. I also think we need to teach the next generation a little bit differently. So this goes back to embracing AI, not resisting it. I think we do need to focus on teaching creativity, critical thinking, validation, sort of more of that architecture type work that we were just talking about in the previous session. What are all of the larger components that are needed to bring this together? How can I think about how everything works together to make it, ultimately something that's going to be a differentiator and so forth. So a couple examples here is spell checking these days, cheating. I remember when all this came out, I remember being younger, having to learn spelling like the back of my hand, right? Essentially using word processors in a way that expressed, myself as someone who knows what they're talking about. And then spell checking comes along. And essentially, it's a shortcut, right? Okay, well, I could just have it underlined in red and fix it, right? If it comes along. Isn't that an issue? I think it could be perceived as an issue for those who had to go through some of that heavy lifting over the course of their education. But it turns out we actually have bigger goals and concerns, right? In terms of building products that are differentiators and so forth, like I was saying before. So I don't want to get hung up on spell checking. And I also think students should be able to use AI to the extent possible. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean being ignorant of all the details, but it does mean essentially standing on the shoulders of technology to get stuff done. But we're definitely not there yet. Okay. So I do want to say, the past few years, I've spent a lot of time experimenting with AI. It's very clear to me that we're just not there yet, right? AI handles basically a lot of the basics, but we still need to be there as humans in the loop who are responsible for what AI is producing to make sure it's doing it correctly. Okay. So another way to think about this is every abstraction that I was sharing before, all those generations of languages, they all leak to various degrees as you sort of remove that abstraction down the stack. Um, Definitely true with AI translation to 3GL languages, right? There are leaks. It doesn't necessarily code it in the 3GL language in the way that you want it to these days, right? So really the key here is to learn where some of those differences might lie and learn to look out for those as well. Plus, use tools and so forth to validate what's being produced, right? Um, Another thing that I like to talk about when it comes to AI is that as AI becomes smarter, what I think we'll see is more and more attackers using AI as well uh, as defenders using AI. And the way that I like to think about this is essentially the AI um, assistants and so forth, as well as tools and products, are going to cover common attacks and defenses. Okay, so the way that I think about it is the AIs are going to go to battle with each other, right? You're going to have AI driven attacks, you're going to have AI driven defenses. But I want to kind of bring that conversation up a level and think about the fact that there's actually a human behind the AI attacks, just as there should be a human behind the defenses who can think creatively, right? So, as attackers use creative attacks, right? Use AI creatively, maybe in ways that weren't thought of before. We need to have humans on the defensive side as well to do the same thing, right? To essentially in real time respond to those attacks. And I think that's going to be the case going forward. I think that we've seen a lot of jumps in technology over the years. I think we've seen this over and over that as tech gets smarter, so do attackers. So it comes down to it being a human versus human battle. So again, you make the difference, right? Anyone who's vibe coding, anyone who's a developer, anyone who's maybe just a product person trying to create an app, you're the difference, right? AI is exciting, but it shouldn't lead us to be lazy. We still have to be alert. We still have to focus on making sure that what's produced is actually good quality. Um, I did have a note here. I wanted to come back to something that Marcelo said, and that's when it comes to having humans in the loop, it's good to have experts around. But one thing I want to point out here is you can learn to be that expert as well, and you should learn to be that expert. Okay, so what that means is maybe even use AI to learn this stuff, right? Instead of just, hey, give me some code that does this thing. How about instead, give me some code that does this thing, but also, how does this work? Why did you do it this way? What if you did it this way? So it comes back down to asking those critical questions and then learning along the way, right? What if a, user of the application inserts some input that I didn't expect, right? Or what is the essentially whitelist or allow list of data that I would want to allow into my application, right? You have to learn how to ask those questions with your critical thinking, creative mind over time. And if you're curious, you're going to gain that knowledge as you go. So, all right. So developers, you're still the author. AI is a co-pilot, not an autopilot, right? You own the code that ships. The AI doesn't. So as you see breaches happen based on vibe coding and so forth, I very much believe that the person who produced that code should be held accountable for that at the end of the day. I think when it comes to rolling out AI at scale, having leaders make it very clear that, hey, you're accountable for what's produced at the end of the day. You can't turn around and blame the AI. That does force more vigilance as well as due diligence when it comes to what's being produced. So again, it's a joint effort between you and the AI, right? Know the fundamentals, learn from AI, realize that AI is trained on code, lots of code, right? The code of the internet, which has varying degrees of quality and security. In a lot of cases, you can actually ask the AI assistants, just like we were going over with Marcelo's talk, um, to do it in a way that is securely. I've done this many times, right? You have the initial piece of code, whatever that is, that you generate that does a thing, and then you turn around and ask it, "Hey, can you do this in a way that is secure?" And it rewrites it in a way that is more secure. So it's like it knew all along. Well, why didn't it just do that to begin with, right? Would be one of those questions. And that's because I don't think our models are there yet. So people's behaviors is still definitely important, like I was saying before. Um, I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to recommend this. So I don't know if you all have spent time thinking about the whole prompt engineering side of writing secure code, but the point here is the better your inputs, right, the safer your outputs. Like I was just saying, AI already knows what quality looks like. You just have to ask for it. So can we pre-ask it, right? Can we actually use preloaded configurations in some sort of shared profile by default? So what I mean by that is, can you specify, hey, for this particular AI assistant, here's what secure coding looks like, right? Whenever all the developers at my company create a secure or a block of code, use this profile that already says or specifies what secure looks like. That way, you'll have a lot tighter control over what high quality and secure code looks like. So definitely recommend that. That's going to take, ideally, these security experts to be able to define that, right? What does secure coding look like? And then essentially scale that across your company. I do think AI tools will soon produce secure code by default. I think it's a matter of time. I think we certainly have a lot of tools these days that can validate and scan our code base, even if it's produced by AI, to make sure that it's high quality. I do think, just like we were talking about, most of these models are trained on the data of the internet, the code of the internet. But I do think these profiles that I just mentioned, when it comes to predefining what good looks like, those are going to be present by default at some point. Okay, we're not there yet, but we've already seen OpenAI's Aardvark come out. So we know that they're aware that people are going to be looking for high quality and secure code when they prompt their AI. I do think that's going to come by default sooner rather than later. Okay. So here's the point. Embrace the future that's coming. Okay. Stay curious. Make sure that you're constantly learning about all of this stuff. Stay creative, stay vigilant, and ultimately stay secure. So, all right. That is all I have. Feel free to connect with me. I was able to kind of rush that a little bit and meet the timeline, but this also saves some time for questions.
Yeah, there's
Or
a
all, do we have any
question.
questions?
Yeah, Ron Dilly is asking, is it time to retire human in the loop in favor of expert in the loop? The former implies presence, the latter demands competence.
I love that. Yeah, because I think when you're saying human in the loop, you should be meaning expert in the loop, right? What's the point of having a human there to help direct things and guide things if they don't know what they're doing? So
Yeah.
I think it's a really good call out. Other questions? I think I
Um,
presented some things that were somewhat controversial here, especially to maybe former or current developers. So I'd be curious what you all think. Should we embrace AI to this extent? What does the
I,
future look like with AI in
I
coding?
I think we're all embracing it. Any comments?
I love Ron, you got some great ones. Use AI or be used by AI. Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, it's important to understand how AI works under the covers as well. But I also think, I mean, I think we're going to find specialists emerge. And one of the points that I'm trying to make here is not everyone needs to be a specialist. So when I was talking about the GLs, right, all of the generation languages, we still today have people that write compilers, right, that do that translation between 3GLs and 2GLs, that do more of that machine specific language coding. Period. We have that today still, right? Now, do we have as many as we used to? Probably not by percentage. I see that being the same. I do think that there will be experts who still play in the 3GL land. Um, there just may not be as many, right? I think a lot of developer jobs are going to be affected by this entire thing, but you're still going to have specialists, right, that can really accurately kind of fill in the cracks that I was talking about before. So
Yeah, I would hate to be a new graduate from computer science now trying to get a junior job.
it's going to get a little rough out there. I am concerned about what I call the um, talent valley, where, right, as time goes on, we're going to see a little bit of a valley when it comes to um, having a full understanding of, the stack here, like the way things actually work under the covers, because I think a lot of folks are going to move toward AI assisted coding and we're going to lose a little bit of that. But I do think it's going to catch up. And I do think that the uh, AI tool providers will become more of the source of high quality code at the end of the day. So again, it goes back to how can you differentiate yourself, right? How can you use your right brain and come up with something different. And I think that that's what the future is going to look like. The AI talent valley is, it's absolutely happening. So Ron, I love your, this is a good conversation because um, what I'm seeing is that, folks are trying to emphasize at their companies usage of AI, which I think very quickly is leading toward folks not really understanding these lower level details, um, to the point that I start to get concerned in terms of what if something breaks at that level? Do we actually have the folks on our team needed to turn around and fix it? But again, do we have assembly to machine uh, developers at our companies that are able to jump in if necessary? Not really. I think what we have is other folks who specialize in that. We have, folks that develop compilers and so forth. You don't need those people on your team at your company so much as just being able to utilize what's already out there in the world. And I think that's going to be the same between 4.5 GL, right, which is AI, to 3GL translations. So,
Yeah, and there's a couple questions more in Q&A. Can you see those?
yeah. How will we keep growing experts in an AI world that did not get an opportunity to learn to be an expert? Well, again, I think it's going to shift. I think the definition of an expert might shift toward their ability to prompt an AI accurately, right? Their ability to vibe code using all the principles that Marcelo shared before, as opposed to knowing all of the details of how to get a 3GL language to work, just like with 2GL and 1GL today, right? So
Oh, yeah.
what do you mean by experts? And can you see how that would shift essentially, Ron? You know, I was not coding. I mean, I learned how to code in assembly. I learned sort of these basics, but I never had to do that. I think a lot of folks who have been around a lot longer might have gone through a phase where they had to learn that. They had to learn assembly, period, to get their job done. I never had to learn that. And I think what we're going to see and what I'm encouraging everyone to embrace is we might shift even more, right? Where developers are better at using prompts for AI than really understanding the 3GL languages. And I think that's fine. So, and there's
So
the
if you write malware,
controversy.
if you add malware, then you do need some assembly.
Yeah, well, that's where see the cracks. This is what I was talking about later on here, where I was talking about where the cracks are. This is really where attackers are going to be focused.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we have the right tools, right, that are going to find those things. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
and if
perfect. I don't know. We find this stuff all the time. I think of like Heartbleed and some of the attacks that we've seen that are just at a level that most people are not thinking about, right, as they build
so here,
apps. So
the last
anyway,
question there is, will AI be used to incorporate security into basic curriculums in school? So we get security aware coders entering the field.
I sure hope so. I think that this has been a problem for a long time. Okay. Getting security aware coders, um, when have we ever had that? I think would be my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
I had literally one in my computer science degree back in the day, 20 some years ago, one optional security class, and that was it. And did most folks talk about incorporating security into anything that I was writing? No, that just wasn't there. And I am hard pressed to find that that's anywhere today. So I don't think that's going to change. I think that we're going to, over time, rely on the AI tools, right, to get the security pieces and the quality pieces right. And I almost think that that's the right thing to do, although I do think it would be important to learn how to verify, at least in this sort of bridge period before we get to the point that AI and tools and so forth are going to be able to help us out. So, and then Ron, you have something else. I like your comments here. So, just adding more layers to protect the system from bad programmers. What is that site? Do you want to explain that a little bit, Ron?
Let me see where he is. Ron, I'm gonna allow you to.
Yeah, he pasted a link here. Just curious what it is.
Hear me right?
I can
Yep,
hear you
yeah.
barely.
Moving the microphone.
There you go.
That's just it's a blog post I wrote about, and that's my blog. It's on all the things we've done over the last 25 years to insulate the system from bad programmers. You know, having a kernel, having processes, having
Mm,
multiple systems, having servers, having clients, having virtual servers, and
mhm.
on infinitum. Microservices on infinitum. Now we're at AIs to isolate the bad programmers from the system. So
Yeah.
it's a little sarcastic.
No, but it's also it's a good point. But I think that comes down to quality control, um, which is necessary and I think always going to be necessary, even with AI. It's just sort of who is doing it and to what extent do we need humans in the loop to do it. I think we'll always need humans somewhere in the loop, but um, to what extent and where would be the question over time here.
Um,
Other questions if we still have time, Pearl?
I think this is it.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Hope